Welcome to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich, the podcast where I bring you the biggest names from the worlds of media, politics, and law. We dive into unfiltered, unapologetic, and insightful conversations. I speak my mind and I encourage my guests to do the same. No topic is off limits as we dive into the issues that shape our world. Today we're honored to welcome a truly magnificent, insightful, principled, and bold voice in American politics. Tara Setmayer. Tara is a former GOP communications director with 27 years of experience on Capitol Hill and in Washington, and is widely known as an advocate for conservative values, democracy, and accountability. You're asking what she's doing with me, and what she's doing with me is she's also the co-founder and CEO of something called the Seneca Project, which is a really important project aimed at women in swing states, Republican and Democrat. She's been a fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics. She's currently a University of Virginia Center for Politics resident scholar. You might recognize her from her work as a political contributor on major networks like CNN, ABC News, from her role at the Seneca Project. She's been on The View and HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. She's a regular guest host for Michael Smirkanish, I never say his name right, program on the POTUS channel. She's a native of New Jersey, brings a unique perspective, combining years of legislative experience with an unwavering dedication to telling it like it is. She's spoken out courageously on topics ranging from political corruption and threats to democracy to the importance of moral leadership in government. And the Seneca Project, which she is the CEO of, is led by women, dedicating to mobilizing women voters in key swing states in support of Kamala Harris. With a focus on safeguarding women's rights, Tara, we're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all the work you're doing in this election.
Thank you so much for having me in this incredibly important moment for our country.
It really is. I mean, I've been through a lot of these, and I've never been through one that makes me as nervous as this one. Do you have any crystal balls in front of you that tell you what's going to happen? What do you think?
Oh my goodness, I wish. I'll leave the crystal ball predictions to my colleague at UVA, Professor Larry Sabato. That's what they're doing. Yeah, Larry's fantastic, and it's really thrilling to be part of their UVA Center for Politics for the last few years, and quite the honor. So I'll leave the crystal ball up to Larry, but I can tell you that the fact that this election is as close as it is gives me a little bit of agita. It's just something
more than a little bit.
Yeah, it's giving me agita, but I am cautiously optimistic for a few reasons. And, in that really lovely introduction you just did of me, you mentioned my role as the CEO and co-founder of the Seneca Project and our focus on women. And the whole reason why my co-founder, Michelle Kinney, and I started this and started it as a bipartisan effort was because we saw the impact that this election cycle and what's happening in this country was having on women. And since post-Dobbs, since Roe was overturned, that was such a political tectonic shift in politics that we knew going into this election cycle, particularly with Donald Trump back at the top of the ticket, that women were sick and tired of being treated as second-class citizens. And the realization that a right had been taken away from us, unlike anything that had ever happened before in history in this country, that we have less rights now than our grandmothers did, which is pretty insane to think about. That women were going to be really fired up, and that we could not underestimate women saying we've had enough of this. And that meant not just Democratic women, Republican women too, because the loss of having agency over our bodies and decisions, it impacts Republicans also. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you're bleeding out in the parking lot of an emergency room in a state that's criminalized women's health care, where doctors have to worry about going to jail if they treat you. How close to death do you have to be for it not to be illegal for a doctor to treat you? That's insane. So I'm cautiously optimistic for a couple of reasons. Number one, the fact that Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket in this moment for women, she brings a credible voice to this issue unlike Donald Trump. He's a predator, she's a prosecutor. So there's that contrast. There's also the ground game operation. Now, as you mentioned in my bio, I spent 27 years with the Republicans. We used to have a
What
superior
happened?
ground game. What happened is Donald Trump. um, but we used to have a superior ground game. And Democrats caught on around Barack Obama time and started to use some of the playbook that Republicans used and made it better. And now Republicans have completely lost all of their institutional and operational advantage in those areas because it's been outsourced to super PACs. The Republican National Committee is not really doing the ground game, get out the vote efforts anymore. It's all been outsourced to super PACs, where a lot of times it's just a grift circle, and they don't have the same operations that the RNC and people who used to do this for decades do. And the Democrats are better funded, they're better organized, and more enthusiastic on the ground. And in a time like this, it doesn't matter how many rallies you have, it matters how many people you get to the polls and get them to actually vote for you. And Democrats have done a superior job there. So those are the main reasons why I'm cautiously optimistic about what's going to happen in November. But it's still too close for comfort for me, really.
Really close. And how do you explain how close it is? I mean, I would have thought, quite honestly, when Biden stepped aside and Kamala stepped in, and she was really flawless over the summer. She did an amazing
Yes.
job, I think, of putting the nomination together, of avoiding a fight inside the party, of putting a convention together, which is, as you know, a really big deal and hard to do, let alone hard to do when you've got, a month of prep time. I thought they did a fabulous job. And I frankly thought coming out of the summer, it wouldn't be close. She'd have built up a comfortable lead. And she hasn't. I mean, it's even right now, if you believe any of the polls. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said about how misogynistic our country really is. I mean, the double standard that's been applied to Kamala Harris compared to Donald Trump is pretty remarkable. And I'm sure there will be volumes written about this, the way the race was covered, the way she was, the scrutiny that she was under versus him, the standard. I mean, it is really pretty infuriating. But for women, we've kind of been saying, like, well, welcome to our lives. We've been living through, especially as women of color. Welcome to our lives. But
How
it's
much
not just that,
racism, how
though.
much sexism, Tara? You cover
Uh,
both angles.
yeah, I'm biracial, so I get to, I get it from everywhere.
Right,
Um,
I know.
I think, well, I used to think that there was more racism than sexism, but I think it's the other way around. I really have looked at things through a different lens now. After my experiences, what I've seen in the Trump era, and just, I think the misogyny is so much bigger. Just look at what happened with Hillary, and now we're
Hmm.
looking at Kamala. You're right. This race should not be anywhere close. But this country has a lot to reckon with. There's a lot of things that need to be reconciled. And I don't think that it's going to be reconciled in an election or two. I think it's a generational fight. I also think um, that Kamala was flawless coming out of the summer. And I was someone who was skeptical of the Democrats being able to unify and pull off what they pulled off.
Hmm.
I've worked on conventions. I know what it takes, and Republicans used to be pre-Trump. Anytime I refer to Republicans, it's pre-Trump. Republicans used to be very regimented and meticulous and organized and pulling off. I've been to 6 Republican conventions, and they are always the stagecraft and all of that. Back to the Reagan era of times when you had, Michael Deaver and all those guys. They understood the theatrics of it and the imagery and how to pull off conventions. Democrats started to catch up with Barack Obama. And but the internal fighting with Democrats, I was concerned that there wouldn't be unification if Biden had dropped out. But there was, and I was pleasantly surprised. And frankly, I wasn't sure Kamala was ready to. I was
Hmm.
part of that. I wasn't the only one, but she blew me away. She was more than ready, more than capable, and demonstrated that out of the gate. And she really hasn't made any major missteps as a candidate by normal political standards. She really hasn't. And in the era of Trump, when you have Nazi rallies and comments about Haitian immigrants eating dogs and cats, a convicted felon, for goodness sakes, a litany of accusations of sexual misconduct against women, the January 6th, the insurrection. I mean, you look at Donald Trump's resume and you compare it to Kamala Harris's resume.
Right.
And we have to say, America, what the hell are we doing? What are we
Well,
doing?
what are we doing, Tara? I mean, I look at that. There's somebody posted a funny thing on Facebook. I saw it a number of times. The stewardess, the flight attendant comes down the aisle and says, which meal would you like? Would you like the chicken or would you like the, cracked glass over, poo-poo? And the answer is, how is the chicken cooked? I mean, what is going on in this election and what does it say about America that those two candidates who you just described are in a race that's too close to call? It's sort of scary to me.
It is. It is. And we've been watching this, I think, accelerate over the last 10 or 15 years in politics. I mean, it started way before Donald Trump, but it really accelerated since the Tea Party and Barack Obama's presidency, and really unearthing the racial divide in this country. And I used to dismiss that the vitriol against Barack Obama was racial. I did. I was like, no, it was economic. And then as things progressed and Donald Trump took over the Republican Party and Republican stalwarts let him, I said, well, they're okay with the racism. And maybe there was a lot more involved here. Now, not dismissing the economic anxiety. That is real. And the divide in our country economically contributes to these factors. It contributes to education level. It contributes to worldview. It contributes to whether you fully appreciate what it means to have a democracy or a constitutional republic and the responsibility we have as citizens, what that means. And then the policies that Donald Trump has put forward, this nationalist populism that has been able to rise up and overtake what used to be traditional conservative values and small L liberal democracy. This is all very illiberal, and people are eating it up because they feel aggrieved. Now, whether that aggrieved feeling is from economics or whether it's from feeling that they are no longer the dominant, white men aren't the dominant force in this country as much as they used to, and they won't be in a couple of decades from now. So this push for the whole great replacement theory and what's going on, the changing demographics in America, is making some people who used to be in power uncomfortable. Same thing with women. Women are rising and having more power and running things, and some men don't like that. And we're seeing that in the way that Donald Trump has run his campaign. He's leaned into this toxic masculinity BS and completely gave a big FU to women. Oh, get over it. You'll be fine. Oh, you wanted this. You wanted your rights taken away, and I'm going to be your protector. I mean, it's all very scary and very creepy. But this is part of who America is. And I think we have to realize that. And I don't know how we deal with it after this election, no matter what the outcome is. This is something that, as a country, I don't know how we heal from it. But I do know that the cancer that is MAGA and what Donald Trump has brought forward in this country has to be defeated. It has to be vanquished with the levers of democracy we still have and thrown onto the ash heap of history so we can start that rebuilding process. Because if we give them power, that's it. We're never coming back from it, ever.
What do you think is going to happen on the morning of November 6th? I mean, are they going to accept defeat if it comes their way? You
No.
know these people.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're not. Donald Trump is starting already. His comments at that hate fest at Madison Square Garden about, immigrants and the speakers there making those awful comments about Puerto Rican citizens here, and all of the misogyny against women. I mean, it was just a mess, but it was who they were. I mean, it's who they are. And they were there and proud. I'm glad that more people are starting to pay attention and seeing it. We've been warning people. Believe them. They're telling us who they are. Stop trying to make excuses for it. They're proud of it. including Donald Trump. He has never apologized for anything ever and never
No.
will. That's not who he is. Roy Cohn was his mentor. Roy Cohn taught him never apologize, in fact, double down. And that's what he's done. And it's worked for him sort of, kind of, so far in his life, I guess. He got to be president once. But we need to make sure that this never happens again. And part of what he has done, starting back in, well, way before, he's always complained ahead of time about being a victim or the system was rigged. This is not new for him. And 2020, he's had 4 years to lay the foundation for this again. And they can look at where they failed the last time, and they are trying to perfect it so that this time they can pull it off. And I know he's already started. He's whining and complaining about that the election is rigged in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Well, why Pennsylvania? Because it has the third largest Puerto Rican American population in the country, next to New York and Florida. But Pennsylvania is going to be close. There's hundreds of thousands of Puerto Rican voters there. So guess what? This is a problem for them. When you call their island garbage, maybe folks aren't going to vote for you. So he's already starting this now. The RNC has basically become, instead of the grassroots get out the vote operation it used to be, it is now becoming, right, it's full of lawyers that are, quote, election integrity lawyers. No, they're not. They're election deniers and they're chaos agents. They've already filed 130 lawsuits preemptively before Election Day. Many have been dismissed, but this is their tactic to flood the zone. And they've muddied the waters for 4 years, questioning the integrity of our election system, prepping their people so that when Donald Trump loses, let's pray, on Tuesday, if it's close, he's going to declare victory. And I don't know what November 6th looks like, but I know that we probably won't know exactly who's president yet. We may have to go through what we went through in 2020 for a couple of days, maybe longer, depending on how close it is, because now they have a lot more of their people, these election denier MAGA people, in positions of power in election offices, in statewide offices, in these swing states, and they have an army of lawyers that are ready to go to muddy this thing up. So we have to remain vigilant. And I just hope and pray that the Democrats have a counter operation ready to go to combat this. It's going to be.
I know a lot of Democratic lawyers who are ready to go. I mean, there's certainly going to be two sides of this, but it's an ugly tradition that Donald Trump has set in motion to have lawyers. You know, I remember Al Gore conceding the minute the Supreme Court decided. You know, I mean, there's a tradition in this country that when you lose, you lose. And Donald Trump doesn't follow that tradition like so many others. What's going on with young women, Tara? I mean, young women could change this election result if they came out and voted. Are they going to?
Well, so far we've seen in early voting that the predominant early voters are women. And younger women have always skewed Democratic. It's the older women, the 45, 50 plus, 60 plus women who have been more Republican since 1980. What we've seen so far, and I'm sure there'll be more analysis after all of the votes are counted, but it's actually the women who are 50 plus who are the highest propensity voters that have shifted toward Kamala Harris plus 11 points. AARP did a really excellent survey on this. And I think that's been underreported. So that's really good because that demographic is a high propensity voter so that they're more likely to go and actually cast a ballot. Younger women and younger voters in general, we all know it's been more difficult to get them to actually vote. They'll protest, they'll do a sit-in or, you know, be an encampment people on college campuses or whatever they do, but then actually going to vote, they don't do that. So we have seen,
I've been on college campuses for decades trying to get students to vote, and it's a very frustrating task.
Right. But one of the positives of the Donald Trump era, which there haven't been many of, but one of the positives of this Trump era has been the increased engagement of younger voters. And we've seen them come out in record numbers since 2020 in you know, presidential elections, midterm elections. They're more engaged. And for young women, They are absolutely fired up because it's their rights that have been taken away,
Yeah,
and that is
you would think.
unfathomable to them. So that is a really big motivating factor for younger women voters. And we hope for, younger men that, they understand, because they're a little bit more, those younger generations are a little more emo, and they, they're a little bit more in tune with their feelings and their communities. But we also have a problem with young white men going
We have a
toward the
big
MAGA
problem.
route, and isolation and being susceptible to extremism, feeling left behind. That is a whole nother problem. But Donald Trump's MAGA movement is tapping into them, and they're betting on these young, aggrieved men voting for Donald Trump in droves. I'm not so sure. I think that's a terrible tactic that they're using. Usually, and you know this, Susan, the idea of campaigns, you want to add voters, not subtract. And so they think they're going to add more of these young male voters, or some of these men who have been disengaged, versus women like who are more high propensity voters, and women make up the majority of the population at the expense. So that's backwards to me. It feels like it's subtraction, and I don't know how you win elections that way.
What's the Seneca Project doing? We see your billboard right in back of you. We see your great purple hat. What exactly are you doing on the ground and in the airwaves to help get women out to vote for Kamala?
Yeah. So, for people who know, they can assume, and they're right, that the Seneca Project name was inspired from Seneca Falls, the 1848 conference that the coalition of women that got together and started the modern day women's rights movement. And we took inspiration from that because it was a coalition effort. It was not only women, you had male allies, you had abolitionists, and it took them decades upon decades of fighting in order to just achieve women's suffrage. And that was only for white women. And then it was 4 more decades before Black women got equal rights to vote. But it was bigger than just voting. It was about bodily autonomy. It was about the ability to make your own financial decisions. It was about women being equal and not treated as second class citizens in America. And so for us, we are a messaging organization. Our super PAC is about telling women's stories, creating the permission structure through those stories and through our content to those more right of center women, more moderate women, that it's okay to vote for a Democrat this time. We don't care who you voted for before. You can work that out with your therapist if you voted for Trump twice before. Just don't vote for him this time. There's just too much on the line. And explaining to women what's at stake through our content. So there are other organizations that are more grassroots, that are registering people to vote or get out the vote on the ground. That's not us. We are a messaging ad organization that you have to plant the seed first with these women before they'll go and get out to the polls. So we start there. We're trying to change hearts and minds, and then get women to convert that fear from fear to outrage to action. So we have put out really, really incredible content. We are a women-led organization. Our ad makers, our editorial teams are women-led as well. My co-founder, Michelle Kinney, is a award-winning creative director. She's got lots of Webby Awards and Polly Awards to prove that. She comes from a theater background, and she's incredible. And she brings that skill set to what we do. And I bring my years of political communications expertise to it. And combined, we're able to speak to women, not at them. A lot of times you have folks that are speaking at women. And we saw some of that in our past political lives, and decided that the best people to talk to women are women, real women. We don't come from wealthy backgrounds. We're both blue collar. She's from upstate New York. I'm from Jersey. I'm the first person to go to college in my family. I was raised by a single mom. My grandfather was a police officer in my hometown. I'm married to a federal law enforcement officer. Like, we are real women that have real experiences, and wanted to translate that through our political messaging with the Seneca Project to women. And we're so, so proud of all of our stuff. And all of our ads are, digitally placed. We're a new organization. We just launched in June. So we don't have the benefit of the mega donors and the legacy organizations have. We're small but mighty. And I have the privilege and blessing to be on national cable news a lot. I have a national footprint there for years as being a never Trump voice. And people trust me because they know I'm incapable of bullshit. And so you may not always agree with me, but you know I'm coming from an honest place. And I consider that a privilege. And we've been using that platform to get the message out. And as more people and the grassroots supporters have supported us, the more we're able to get our messaging out to those battleground states, which are going to be the deciding factor. We believe that if you galvanize women, we will save this democracy.
And how do you do it? What are your message? Tell us as much as you can about what your message is. Is
Yeah,
it look at your own journey? Tell me about your own journey. I mean, you used to be a Republican. You and I have probably worked on opposite sides of all the 6 Republican conventions you've been to. I think I've been
for
to 8
sure.
Democratic conventions, and I've been to some Republican ones too, as the liberal on the Fox team. And
Right.
you're right, the Republicans were really good at this for a long time, and they were great
Yes.
at the ground game. And they're not playing it this time, and the Democrats are. But what about your own journey, Tara? How did you go from being a Republican for so many years to being, to sounding like one of my Democratic friends?
You know what? I think that the things that bonded us as Americans, those basic principles of loving our country and patriotism and wanting America to be a more perfect union, have have brought a lot of us together who love our democracy and want it to succeed. We may have had different approaches to how we got there, and we may differ on policy, but for the most part, we didn't disagree on the fundamentals of our Constitution and our democracy. Donald Trump and MAGA has torn all of that up. And I was a compassionate conservative. I was always someone I wasn't really necessarily a party person. I would always, yes, I was part of the Republicans. Yes, I worked with lots of Republicans and did Republican things, but I was never afraid to criticize the party when I thought they were doing things that weren't okay. And that was a blessing and a curse for me. People accused me of being a bomb thrower back in the day, even before the Trump era. And I didn't care because if I felt it was the right thing to do, then it's the right thing to do. And if it was something wrong that the party was doing, we have to call it out, or else people aren't going to respect you. When it's obviously not okay, somebody's got to call it out. And that was me.
What
So
is the
when
first thing you called out, Tara? When did you realize that you no longer had a home in this place, in the
Well,
Republican Party?
the first time I started calling things out was back during the 2002 midterms, where I felt that Republicans were blowing an opportunity to speak to minority communities in a way that was more relatable and authentic. I was like, guys, you're using a lot of tropes, you're making a lot of assumptions, and you're just parachuting in 6 weeks before an election, thinking that that's going to move voters. It's not. You have to establish relationship. You have to. I really admired Jack Kemp and his work when he was HUD secretary, and the way that he knew you had to be present for people to
Hmm.
trust you and see how those policies are working for them. That personal relationship matters. And Republicans were not very good at that in minority communities. And I was very critical about the way they were doing that. And I had proposed a different plan on how to do it. And people were like, yeah, okay, no, we're not doing that. They were not willing to invest the money to play the long game. And I said, it's at
Hmm.
your own peril. So that's where I first started to speak up, because by then I was established long enough. I've been in Republican politics since I was a freshman at George Washington University in DC in 1993. So by 2002, I'd been around and had enough experience where I could finally start to speak out a little bit more.
Hmm.
But where I really started to say, okay, I'm done. I mean, I was one of the first never Trump Republicans to speak out nationally. I was a CNN contributor at the time when Donald Trump came down the escalator. CNN had originally hired me at the end of 2014, going into 2015, as a Republican commentator because they needed to have balance. And I,
Yes,
right? And I, as a
sure. And
minority
you looked the
woman,
part. You were
yeah,
just what you
I
were
checked
looking
all the
for.
boxes,
A
right?
minority Republican who's
Yeah.
beautiful and
Well,
articulate.
well, thank you.
Why not?
Yeah, and I was able to very effectively argue Republican policies and politics, and everything was great until Donald Trump came down the escalator in 2015, and I said, "Come on, like the party's not going to support this guy. I mean, let's be serious here." So I was critical of him from day one and never, ever, ever gave him a pass on anything. I was very vocal. And then as time went on and the vote started coming in and more Republicans started to latch on to Donald Trump, I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you doing? He's attacking John McCain. He's attacking Gold Star families. He's attacking, Hispanic immigrants here. I mean, I'm a pretty tough person on border security. I worked on that issue on Capitol Hill, one of my legislative portfolios. But like, where's the humanity in this? This is craziness. And people were more and more were getting on the Trump train because he was winning. And I was like, what a bunch of cowards and hypocrites. And I frankly didn't think he would win. I was wrong, like many of us were. But
I thought he would win.
Well,
I wrote a book about Hillary and the case for Hillary Clinton. And I was nervous up till election day. I canceled my class because I was afraid to tell them that Hillary was going to lose. And I didn't even say that early in the day.
Yeah, there were a lot of mistakes on that campaign, a lot of missed opportunities, And I think they again, well, obviously they underestimated Trump's appeal and how much people really didn't like her after decades and decades of criticism. And so, and I think, interestingly, I have some folks who are in that, in the inner circle, and Bill Clinton was warning Hillary and giving her, I don't have to tell you that. And she didn't want to listen because I get it. She wanted to be able to do it on her own. She didn't want to hear, this was her time. And, Bill, I'm done with you now. It's my time. And I think some of that blinded her to his advice. He knows how to talk to the people she needed.
Politics.
He is. So anyway, but one of the funny things is that Paul Begala and I are very close friends. And we used to be on opposite sides and battle each other on CNN panels for years. As a matter of fact, when Paul Begala came to GW my freshman year, it was right after Bill Clinton defeated George H.W. Bush. And so the college Republicans, of which I was a part, we were all very salty about that. And we went to his talk that the college Democrats sponsored at GW to kind of heckle a little bit and just be pains in the asses. And he was so obnoxious because, they were proud of what they had done. Nobody thought they were going to take out George H.W. And so they had every right to be, but he was so obnoxious. And I'll never forget that. And I bust his chops about that years later, where I was like, Paul, because he's the nicest guy now. I mean, the nicest guy, nice 4 kids, a lovely wife. I absolutely adore Paul Begala. He's one of my best political friends. And we joke about that. And I say, I remember when you were young, Paul Begala, coming right off that Clinton campaign at GW, and you were such an arrogant SOB. He goes, no, you're right. I was. He goes, and then I got married and had kids. And I was like, no, you're lovely now. But it was during that time where strange political bedfellows, right? Politics, sometimes you just never know who you're going to be on the same side with, but it reveals character. Because it was Martin Luther King who said that a man's character is revealed not in a time of comfort and convenience, but in time of controversy. And for me, the Republican Party writ large showed its character or lack thereof as Donald Trump continued to ascend, and they continued to make excuses and ultimately allowed him a permission to be terrible. And there were so many opportunities for them to off-ramp. Now, I stayed a Republican even after the election because I thought, okay, people need, like me and Michael Steele and others, there needs to be some conscience here calling out the BS.
Voice inside the party.
That's right. And I was like, I'm not going to let these people get away with it. I know them. I know the people who are hypocrites because I was in the rooms when they would disparage Donald Trump and talk about him, and they knew he was dangerous, but they were doing it for their own political power and relevance. So I'm not going to let you get away with that. And I tried. And the first time I was like, I don't think I can do it, was after Charlottesville. The both sides bullshit, and then Republicans defending that. And I said, okay. And Michael Steele was like, listen, don't let them run you out. We need sane people if we're going to try and fix this. And I was like, okay. And then there was just so many things after that where, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings was another time where I said I was very uncomfortable with staying a Republican. I was becoming really despondent with how Republicans were handling this. Every opportunity they had to do the right thing, they didn't. And then the Republican women, they could have stopped Brett Kavanaugh. They knew it was wrong and they sold out. And that was very disheartening. the Helsinki press conference. I'm a big foreign policy person, and I could not believe that Donald Trump stood up there and took the side of our enemy over our own American intelligence services and Republicans. What happened to that? Nope, that was fine. I mean, it just kept going on. And then when he started this crap about, not accepting the election in 2020 and laying the foundation for violence, and then he didn't in the East Room of the White House on an election night, he executed his plan and did not concede. Right. And Republicans the next morning let him get away with it without, and now we're talking a constitutional crisis. These are the same people that would sanctimoniously walk around Capitol Hill with their pocket constitutions lecturing everyone else. And here they were letting Donald Trump tumble us into a potential constitutional crisis and didn't do anything about it. So not even the canons of the Constitution would get them to finally say enough. I said, I'm done. This party is no longer rehabilitate. You can't rehabilitate them. They are too far down the rabbit hole. The cancer of Trumpism has metastasized where it's done. I don't want any part of it. And I left the party the next day. January 6th just solidified my decision. And it was one of the most heartbreaking days. I cried tears and I just couldn't believe it. And Republicans once again bent the knee, acquiesced, and still supported him even after a violent coup to overturn a free and fair election that could have potentially gotten people killed, including the vice president of the United States, and injured hundreds of officers. And some officers lost their lives as a result. And they still supported this man, this wretch. And I said, I hope the party burns to the ground. I want nothing to do with it anymore. And if we can't even agree on basic democratic constitutional principles in this country, then we have nothing in common anymore. And now you need to be defeated. And I've dedicated my life to make sure that we maintain our democracy, that we maintain this great American experiment that is of, for, and by the people. And there is no room in a liberal democracy for MAGA or Donald Trump.
There's 1 week left as we're talking today. Tell me how people can help you with the Seneca Project. You've been such a fabulous guest. Your passion is so infectious. I can't understand why we're having this conversation about this close election that's too close to call when we've got Donald Trump on the other side. But we are, and there's a week left, and there's a lot of people who want to know what they can do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Susan. Well, of course, like I said, we are a super PAC. We run on donations, and we've been really fortunate to have strong grassroots support when people see us and see our content. You can go to senecaproject.us. You can see all of our ads there. There's a donate link there. You can follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, unfortunately, even though it's, we're there. It is what it is. As long as, we still have that freedom.
As long as we have the eyes, we want to be there.
That's right. And everything is at Seneca Project US. We have an incredible closing ad that it's actually more than an ad. We consider it an anthem. It's called American Girl. We just released it today, as a matter of fact. And the song was written and performed by Tony nominee Laura Bell Bundy of Legally Blonde and Hairspray. She also is a country music artist. She's on our advisory board. And we are looking for that, infusion of last minute financial support so that we can get American Girl in front of those women voters in the battleground states and motivate them to get out there and vote because of how important it is. We as women have marched and fought and persevered throughout American history to reclaim our rights and to fight for them. And we're in that position again. And even when America didn't love us back, we still loved our country. And we are in a position now to reclaim that democracy and that freedom. And so American Girl tells that story, and it's a call to action for women. And it's beautiful. My co-founder, Michelle Kinney, like I said, she's our chief content and creative officer. We've helped produce this, and it's phenomenal. And we hope that it inspires people to support us and get out there and vote.
What comes next?
This is a generational fight, and it doesn't end on election night, doesn't end on November 6th. It takes work to maintain a democracy, and democracy doesn't defend itself. So as citizens and as good stewards of that democracy that our founders hoped that we would all be in creating this grand experiment, we have to remain vigilant. And what comes next is midterms. And then the elections after that. I mean, it does not end. The fight continues. We have to. That's right. If Donald Trump wins, a lot of things are going to end. We're done. Right. We're not going to be a democracy anymore. And that's not just being hyperbolic. I mean,
no, that's history, what he said.
Yeah, and history has shown us what happens. I mean, this is not new. What Donald Trump is saying and doing isn't new. I mean, we've seen this. Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat is on our advisory board. She wrote an amazing book called Strong Men that lays it all out. And she's been warning people. We've seen this before, and it didn't end well. So, it doesn't end well. So let's, we still have the opportunity while we still have the power as citizens to exercise that. We need to, and make sure that we maintain this, and then we carry on. And if God forbid the unimaginable happens, we have to continue to fight and use the levers of our democracy that are still left to stay in it. It's literally like the Rebel Alliance fighting the empire here. If God forbid, that's the posture that we have to take, but we can't lay down and give up. We just can't.
Okay, Tara, you are just fabulous.
We appreciate Susan, and you're a legend, Susan. So
thank you, honey. You're
don't wonderful. Think that your work, regardless of whether we disagreed on policy, you were still a trailblazer.
I've been
you were a trailblazer.
Women. All these women I've been promoting for years are now in positions of power, so it's good to see.
And we appreciate you. So I wanted to make sure I let you know that.
All right, Tara Setmayer, thank you so much. You've been listening to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich, and I want to thank Tara again for everything she's done and for coming on in such a candid and thought-provoking conversation. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch every episode over on our YouTube channel. Please leave a rating and review. This is the way this world works, so that we can get to more listeners and more folks to listen to our conversation. Follow us on X, we do it too, at No Holding Back FM. And for my weekly column, visit our website, estrichgolden.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on No Holding Back.
Women's suffrage is a long story of hard work and heartache crowned by victory.
Was it so hard being an American girl?
Women throughout the country are committed to winning these rights for themselves.
Was it so hard living in a first problem world?
I'm Connie Chung, CBS News, New York.
When the American promise is the land of the free, but I'm waiting for the bill for the air that I breathe. Was it so hard being an American?
I do.
I pray that we all remember our children are watching.
Every heart beats true for the red, white, and blue. Tell me, girls, what are we gonna do? Every heart beats true for the red, white, and blue. Tell me, girls, what are we gonna do? Every heart beats true for the red, white, and American girls. What are we gonna do? Every heart.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
Every heart beats true for the red, white, and blue. Tell me, girls, what are we gonna do?